I, a 24-year-old man, met a 22-year-old woman in a community college class when I was 20. We came from very different backgrounds. I was from a middle-class family looking for a more affordable way to attend college, while she was living in near poverty and attending school because her parents were threatening to kick her out if she didn't. She left school about a year into her studies while I continued and graduated. During her first year, we developed a relationship, and she moved into my apartment. Her relationship with her parents is almost non-existent, and she has very few friends outside of one or two women she knew from high school, who I personally think are not very ambitious. I earn around $80,000 a year, so we live relatively comfortably, but finances are still somewhat tight. I can't pinpoint exactly when I started to lose interest, but the fact that she refuses to work, won't cook, wants to eat out every day, doesn't want to go back to school, and constantly wants to buy clothes and other items just started to irritate me more and more. I work in a predominantly female workplace, and seeing my coworkers, who have many opportunities, interesting hobbies, and goals, makes it harder when my girlfriend spends 7 hours a day scrolling through Instagram or TikTok, and thinks that being intimate is all she needs to contribute. Our relationship isn't bad. We argue occasionally like any typical couple and have an active intimate life, but that's about it. From her point of view, if I broke up with her, it would seem sudden, but I'm pretty much ready to move on and wouldn't feel regretful, no matter how harsh that sounds. The problem is that she has no job, no money, almost no friends, and no family support. I'm not heartless. I don't want to leave someone nearly homeless, but I also don't want to stay with someone who isn't doing anything with their life. I don't know what to do. Relevant comments. A Reddit user comments. Is she unhappy with her life? She's not really unhappy. She always sends me over 30 memes a day on Instagram, and is genuinely funny. She does have mood swings sometimes, but that's typical for her. I've tried talking to her about this multiple times, but she either thinks I'm not serious or changes the subject. When I was earnest, she mentioned she would reconsider checking out courses, but it ultimately didn't work out, and I gave up trying. She just doesn't seem to care. Update. First, I want to thank everyone for the advice I received on the previous thread, as it helped me figure out how to approach this situation. When I made that post, I was having an extremely bad day and didn't expect it to get so much attention, so I don't think I gave her a fair defense. Also, I received dozens of messages, ranging from people asking for her contact information so they could consider her as a live-in partner, to helpful advice suggesting I start hiding valuable items. When I mentioned that she came from a poor background, her father is a laborer, and her mother lives a similar lifestyle to what she currently experiences. Their home is about 1,100 square feet and is located in a bad area of town. Considering her father's previous ultimatum, I doubt he would take her back as she hasn't been home in years. Yes, I have talked to her about this, maybe 3 times since January. I either gently suggested it would be nice if she found a hobby or bluntly told her that she needs to get a job or return to school. Each time, she either changes the subject, makes a joke, or tries for a few days before returning to her old habits. She is a kind partner who asks about my day, tries to make me laugh or lighten the mood when I am annoyed, and generally shows a lot of affection. This makes it hard for me when none of that seems to work anymore, and I start to see her as just another person. Now, for the confrontation. Last night, while we were both getting ready for bed, I didn't change my clothes and instead stood there telling her we needed to talk. At first, she was just smiling and bouncing on the bed, thinking I wasn't serious. But eventually, she started to understand the situation. I told her that something felt off. I had tried to make our relationship work, and had been patient for the past few years, but I wasn't sure how much longer I could wait for her to find a job, go back to school, or pick up a hobby. I told her it frustrated me that she didn't seem to care about herself and that I disliked that she had no goals or ambitions. This was probably the first time in a long while that she paid as much attention during our conversation. She agreed with what I was saying and even offered suggestions on where to apply for jobs, what courses interested her, and said I could oversee her applications to ensure she was honest. She thought I was still willing to make this work, and part of me hoped this would be the moment she would change. So, the next part was even harder for both of us. I first told her that I didn't love her the same way. This gradually led to me saying I no longer felt anything for the relationship and felt disillusioned. I was tired and wanted a fresh start with someone more goal-oriented, who wanted more from life. When she realized what I meant, she began to cry and asked why I hadn't mentioned this sooner. I mentioned that I had consistently requested her to cook, accompany me on outings, or go back to school, even offering to cover her tuition fees. Everything. She said she understood that, but was upset I didn't say it was causing me to lose interest in her, because from her perspective, it seemed like I still loved her. She started apologizing, saying she wasn't in the right mental state and had no motivation. She claimed she had no interest in any hobbies and only looked forward to spending time with me when I came home. None of this really changed how I felt, except making me uncomfortable, so I tried to continue by saying I thought she would be better off with someone else. But she cut me off and became more anxious. She continued apologizing for her actions and said she would be a better partner. She promised to go with me wherever I wanted and to look for courses starting in August. She didn't want to lose me, as she had nothing else in her life and was upset that I had stopped loving her. There were so many tears that I said we would discuss this again once she calmed down, which we did about an hour later. She begged for 2 months to make a change and promised she would improve. Again, she listed places she would apply to and said she would be a better partner. I didn't want to leave her without a place to live, so this seemed like a reasonable compromise, even though I still had my doubts. I reaffirmed that I wanted to see other people, but she seemed more determined to fix the relationship than to work on her goals. She asked me repeatedly what she could do to win back my love, and that she didn't want me to hate her. She said this was the worst part of all, being done with the only person she had. It seemed like she was about to break down again, so I agreed to see how things stood in a month. In my mind, if I gave her 2 months to get back on her feet, she would be ready to move on by then. I also didn't want her to suffer a complete mental breakdown while I was still around, so giving her a month to address the relationship would allow her to come to terms with things. I slept on the couch last night and will probably continue to do so for a while. She came out around 3 a.m., wanting to talk more, but I said I was exhausted and we would talk tomorrow. She then lay on the floor next to me for the remainder of the night, continuously apologizing. When I told her to stop, she quietly agreed and sobbed under her blanket. That's everything that has happened so far. This was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, but I regret nothing and feel better after expressing everything. I don't know how this situation will be in 2 months, but I made it clear that was the deadline. This post might get buried, so I might not update again, but I will definitely message those who have supported me with how it turns out or anyone else who wants an update. Thanks. Update 2. I want everyone who has sent me private messages to know that I have read them all, especially those of you who have gone through similar situations and shared your stories. I have been doing some self-reflection and think I have figured out how to handle this situation that will help with my lack of communication skills. I know I'm not perfect, but I still fully support the decisions I made that night. I might post an update sooner, in about a week or so. As the day after our argument I feel a bit more hopeful than usual. I'm not sure how long this feeling will last, but I should make the most of it. I just wanted to post this to thank everyone who has shared their stories with me privately, as I can't message you all individually. Your stories have been very helpful in guiding my decisions about this situation. Update 3. After the argument that night, we didn't talk much at home. It was awkward and tense for a day or two. I've been told I'm a workaholic by nature, so it was easy for me to stay at the hospital as a distraction. During that time, she started cooking again. Eventually, I sat down with her after she requested a more detailed conversation about why I felt our relationship was failing. She promised not to cry or get upset and wanted me to be completely honest so she could better understand. She said she wanted to try everything to fix this. I was quite hesitant about this, and I can't really explain why. But since we've been together for 4 years, I wanted to make an effort out of respect, even though a large part of me was upset about having to do so, as I feel I've never received the same effort from her. There have been many different opinions in my last update. The main suggestions were to kick her out immediately and leave her before things get worse. Try to find a way to fix our relationship, or end the relationship altogether, but continue living with someone who might become very anxious. I considered all these main pieces of advice and read through almost every reply, including even the most speculative, strange, and extreme comments from Reddit users. More importantly, I took significant influence from those who shared their past experiences with me, either about being stuck in loveless relationships for years or eventually overcoming their problems and forming a stronger connection. Now, about our conversation. She mentioned she saw something on TikTok where couples put a phone on a table with a timer and wanted to try something similar, where each person would express what made them upset. I thought that was a bad idea. If we were going to discuss our problems, it would be better without a time limit. She eventually consented and said I could proceed first, inquiring when I first began to lose my affection for her. As I mentioned before, it wasn't due to one specific action, but rather a growing feeling that worsened over time. I explained this to her, and she then asked when I felt the most angry. I said it would take me some time to think, and she said that was fine. After a short while, an idea occurred to me. At first, I struggled to find the right words, but eventually, it started to flow. I told her the worst time was when I first started working at the hospital. To keep it brief, the workload was intense. It was constant work with little to no breaks, as I was constantly learning new things that school hadn't taught me, while being expected to handle it like a professional. It was undoubtedly the most stressed I've ever been, and I believe other registered nurses can relate. That year changed my perspective. I learned that hard work pays off if you have the drive and passion. I told her that was when I started losing feelings the fastest. Seeing her at home, doing nothing, coming home to no food, her not having a job, not learning anything, and spending all her time on the internet with nothing to show for it. I mentioned that it upset me even more when I had suggested jobs with easy schedules or finding a new interest in school that would work out better than before, only to have each attempt rejected. I told her plainly that it disgusted me. She asked why I hadn't made it a bigger issue at the time, and said I should have communicated my feelings to her. I told her there are some things that shouldn't need to be said, like reminding her to take care of herself, eat, or do something other than mindlessly scrolling on her phone for hours each day. I also told her that after coming home from the hospital on stressful days, the last thing I wanted was to spend my time begging my girlfriend to be productive. So I kept quiet and accepted her as she was still nice and caring. I had no other reasons to end things, and the resentment only grew worse from there. It was around this time that I became more unkind, which I now regret, but I will still include it as I have with everything else. I told her that when she gave up nursing I was disappointed because I felt she was more than capable of doing what I had done. But after spending more time in the relationship and getting to know her better, I realized that with her personality, she would never have finished. That's why I suggested easier and less demanding jobs, more relaxed majors for school, or even just cooking or finding a hobby. I would have appreciated any effort at that point. Still, she chose to do nothing for years, which is why I eventually felt done with her romantically. She asked if I hated her, and I said I didn't know. I told her she was very loving and kind, but I hated how she had managed her life up to that point. I didn't hold any ill will toward her after expressing everything, but I also felt nothing else. I was just ready to move on. During this conversation, we maintained eye contact. There were times when it seemed like she might break, but she stayed as calm as she could while I said what I needed to say. I told her I was done, and she could speak her mind now. She requested if we could resume the discussion later and shut herself in our room for the remainder of the day. The following day, we met once more and concluded our discussion. She told me she thought she might be depressed, saying she hadn't felt sad before that night, just lacked motivation. I had received a few messages suggesting that I ask her to get tested for ADHD, but when I brought it up, she was very adamant that she didn't feel comfortable with it. I knew she didn't like needles or hospital visits, but her outright refusal to get tested for disorders, even though I explained it was different from a regular hospital visit, surprised me. She asked if she could change her behavior, would I give her another chance? I said I didn't know because I felt nothing at the moment and wasn't sure if her changes would bring back any feelings, especially since it took me reaching my breaking point to address it. She inquired about any possible compromise, and I explained that if, after a month, I found sufficient reasons to continue, I would consider it, though I couldn't promise my feelings would come back. However, I would match any effort she put in. She was frustrated by my answer, but I said that's how it would be. She handed me a note with a list of hobbies and interests she wished to pursue, with photography and cooking being the primary ones. She told me she was looking into these and showed me her phone with proof of applications she had submitted on Indeed and Glassdoor for some entry-level positions. I told her that if she showed enough passion or interest in these hobbies, I wouldn't mind her not working, as long as she was improving herself. But if she did nothing, it would be best for her to look for a new job if she moved out. I've also received inquiries in private messages about whether I have any personal friends to confide in. I share my thoughts with 2 female colleagues at the hospital, whom I trust fully because they are very down to earth. They both said I would eventually be love-bombed, and that things would return to how they were before. They advised me to stand firm in moving on. They have been very helpful friends and even offered to let me stay over for a few nights, suggesting I might fall for her manipulation if I stayed near her. Although it felt odd since I am still technically in a relationship, I said I would consider it if the situation worsened. I find their advice practical, so I always try to take it to heart. Despite many messages from you all privately or publicly warning me that this might be a mistake, I want to make one last attempt. I still feel very closed off and distant and am indifferent about our current situation. However, many of you have told me that this can eventually improve with enough effort from both sides. I have also followed the advice of those suggesting that we cut off physical closeness by continuing to sleep in separate rooms. Each day, she has been sleeping on the floor right below me, even when I tell her that I would prefer to be alone with my thoughts. She insists that this is something she will not accept. That's everything for now. The next update will probably be at the 1-month mark, as I don't feel there is anything else to say at the moment. I am just waiting to see if things can improve now that we are working on this to some extent. It is so surprising how things turned out to be. It is terrible to see someone you once loved go into a place where nothing happens for a long time, especially after you have done everything possible to help them find their way in life. The annoyance of returning home every day to the same situation, stagnation and no change must be killing. I can feel the gravity of realizing that, knowing I am ready to move on but do not want to leave someone who has no other options. This is a hard position, understandable if you ask me. Still, in most instances, it may not be the best option for both of you just staying together like that.